Welcome to the Dead Harvey Podcast. This is the place for indie horror filmmakers and fans. We recognize, celebrate, and promote the indie horror film scene, and we love having you with us. Today, we have a very special guest host, Jefferson Epgar. Jefferson and I used to work together. We had a real life horror experience when we worked together because we used to work in a restaurant. And whenever it was talked about not having enough ranch or the possibility of ranch running out, there was more than a lingering possibility of violence in the air. So it was very dangerous. So we lived through a horror movie. But now we're talking about fictional fun horror movies. And these two were great. So a little while back, I did a combo called a critter combo. So I was looking at critter movies. And one of them was Lamageddon. And another one was The Velocipaster. So The Velocipaster about a priest that turns into a dinosaur and fights crime. And then a llama from outer space that goes and attacks a bunch of kids at a party. Both those are like really fun movies. So that would be fun to do like another combo and bring Jefferson on, because Jefferson and I used to talk about movies at work all the time. And that's how we would entertain ourselves at work. And we had tons of great movie conversations there. So for the Coscarelli combo, and Don Coscarelli, of course, he's most known for Beastmaster and Phantasm.
I just love how he bases a lot of his stuff on books and then tweaks it and makes it his own.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's something I love about Tarantino films.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just, he knows what he's making. He knows he's making a comedy horror, and
yeah,
and a large amount of his movies, aren't for everyone. They're kind of like once you understand what they are, then you get on board, and then
yeah.
Then the movie becomes this enjoyable roller coaster, and I really have a lot of praise for movies like that, because they're very brave to make, it's kind of like, and the studio is allowing you to make something like this, and it's just, and that's something I feel kind of is in all of his films, is like, you can sit back and think, how did this film get made at this time? And but at the same time, you're like, wow, I love how this movie was made at this time.
Yeah.
You kind of have like appreciations for it. So and I get that from every one of his movies, and I think that's one of the things that brings all that charm, even if it's horror and graphic, it's still comedic and lovable, and I think the best word to describe that type of filmmaking is it just has a charm to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Coscarelli, you can tell that he's very vested in his movies. He's very passionate about them, and he's very interested in telling something that's unique, something that's a little bit offbeat. And that's what I really dig about independent movies, and the weirdness too. The weirdness is great. Like when you're going from Phantasm to Beastmaster to this. So the two movies that we'll be talking about here for the Coscarelli combo are going to be Bubba Ho-Tep and also John Dies at the End. John, both are based off of books. Well, Bubba Ho-Tep novella, and then John Dies at the End of book. But so for the first one that we'll dive into is Bubba Ho-Tep. This is a fantastic movie where the great Bruce Campbell plays Elvis, pretending that he's an Elvis impersonator. Much time has gone by, and he's in a rest home. He makes friends with a black guy who says that he's JFK. He says that when they shot him, he did not get killed, and Lyndon Johnson got him out of there and sort of hid him so he wouldn't be around, and they dyed his skin color. And so
that's right.
So the most
that color.
And if that's not bizarre enough, these two team up to fight a mummy. He's basically been stolen from the museum. He had gotten in a car crash and escaped and come back to life, come back and attack the elderly. And not only does he attack them,
and he's got a cowboy hat.
That's true. Yeah, he's dressed up like a total cowboy. Yeah, and the way that he kills them is he sucks their souls out through their asshole. So now, where in any sort of Hollywood mainstream movie would anybody be able to get away with this? But the great thing about it is that Joe R. Lansdale, I've read several of his books, and they're just as weird like this. He's basically a combination of it was like the Texas version of Stephen King and Tarantino put together. and he's just fantastic. Just crazy,
That's
weird
fair.
stuff,
That's
like with the
fair.
Western flair and total, like a lot of like pulp flair too.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably the only movie in Hollywood where souls come out of the butthole. I think you're right.
They don't actually show that, but it's kind of funny. Like Bruce Campbell says, he goes, "Well, the reason that they're attacking us here is like if souls were dying, this would be the lowest amount of life for a zombie or for a mummy to suck the soul out of." And the mummy can constantly get rid of. Well, basically, you can get away with killing all these people at the rest home because there's always a person that dies like every week or so. And it reminded me of where we used to live. I used to live like around the Burbank area, and there's a place called Frank's Cafe that they used to shoot a lot of stuff at. And there was an elderly home nearby. Is it like an elderly home or a hospice center or something like that? But there was literally like every time I go by there, going to work, was on the way to work, and there was an ambulance outside. I was like, oh shit, another person died. Holy crap.
Yeah.
But that is like the perfect cover for a mummy to just keep feeding souls. And the mummy, so he'll just like build up all these souls, and then he'll just slowly digest them and recycle them until he gets rid of all their souls completely, and there's no existence for them, so they don't have any afterlife to go to at all. The mummy just keeps like regurgitating like a cow's stomach and digesting their souls. So it's a really bizarre and weird concept. And the hilarious thing too, the mummy also writes on the bathroom walls in hieroglyphics. So like if you're in junior high and you're writing on the walls like call X next for a good time, or that's what like the mummy is writing about Cleopatra and stuff like that.
Right. I love that though. I don't think I would want anything but that. Like I want my mummy to write in hieroglyphics.
It's hilarious, and especially since he's writing like juvenile stuff in hieroglyphics. And there's also some fantastic lines in this because the book that's adapted from Joe Lansdale has bizarre dialogue. So here's some of my favorites. So Bruce Campbell at the beginning of the movie, he's in the rest home and he's feeling all shitty, and like all his roommates are dying all the time. And one of his roommates passes away, and his daughter, the roommate's daughter, comes over, and she bends over, and Bruce Campbell's like, she's not even threatened to me because I'm just like a harmless old man, and I'm just sort of sad and pathetic to her. He goes, but I did felt my pecker flutter once like a pigeon having a heart attack. And
then, oh man, is that line in the book? Do you know?
I think I read it a long time ago, but I think there are all kinds of weird shit like that Joe Lansdale puts in his book, and it's just hilarious. There's another book series called Hap and Leonard that he writes. They did a Sundance series. They did 3 seasons of it, and they're hilarious. And it uses like a lot of his dialogue, but it doesn't. He uses quite a bit of it, but if you read his books, it's even more. It's just all like very entertaining. It's totally Tarantino-like. It totally reminds you of that. It's hilarious. Very pulpy and very Tarantino-like. It's great. One of his best books, like my favorite book that I read of his, is called The Drive-In, and I really hope they'll make that into a movie someday, because it's about these kids that got into a drive-in in the 80s, and they're watching, can't remember which movies they're watching, whether it's like Evil Dead or there was like a double bill, but they go out there and this meteorite strikes, and all these zombies start attacking people at the drive-in. It basically locks people into the drive-in, and if they wander out of the drive-in, they go into like a parallel. If they make it out of there, they get into like a parallel world where there's like dinosaurs and shit. So there's all these weird like alternate movie worlds outside of it.
Is this a horror comedy?
Yeah, it's weird, like kind of like uncomfortable comedy, but just awesome and like very pulpy.
That sounds like a Stephen King plot.
It's very King-like. Yeah, it's very King-like. It's like a lot of his stuff is kind of King-like, but weirder and with more comedy. Yeah, like with more like dark humor. Yeah, but it's great. But like there's the villain is called the Popcorn King, and he like mutates to have like to have like weird shit like grow out of his head like a big popcorn bucket.
Yeah,
and there's all kinds of like.
I was just envisioning that. Like, does he have a popcorn crown?
Yeah.
I was just thinking that.
No, it's great. No, he's like a lot of the stuff that I've read of Joe Lansdale has just been so completely unique, and I think that's why Coscarelli was attracted to that material, and it's got to be like almost one of those things where it's an indie thing, because I think it would just be way too hard to convince Hollywood to give you money to make a movie like that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, absolutely, especially nowadays.
Yeah,
like when you're expected to use CGI and you're expected to, I mean, not that that's the main thing, you have to have practical effects, but a story like that would be really difficult to get green lit through Hollywood these days.
Yeah,
For
and I
sure.
think that's why Coscarelli doesn't do like his movies are kind of like he's made enough movies, but he's not like churning out movies all the time. You could tell he takes his time and he like really develops something that he likes and makes it to be the way that he wants it to be. So they're kind of like a treat when they come out. When he comes out with a new movie, it's kind of a treat.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
A couple of the other lines that I thought were hilarious. Bruce Campbell has this growth on his pecker, and the nurse has to come in and put some like cream on it to stop the growth from going.
Right.
And when he's thinking about the daughter that comes in, he goes, "There have been 2 presidential elections since I had a boner like that one." And, and when the mummy is attacking him, the mummy like is throwing hieroglyphics at him to insult him. And it translates them to say, "By the unwinking red eye of Ra," and then "Eat the dog dick of Anubis, you asswipe," which I've just started busting up laughing at. But there's just this one of the most unusual and entertaining movies. And the greatest thing about this movie to me is that Bruce Campbell is in the whole thing, because Bruce Campbell is just basically comedy gold anytime he's on screen.
I fully agree with that, for sure.
Have you seen Briscoe County Jr.?
I have not.
Or it's great. It's a
the title sounds familiar.
It's like a sci-fi western series that Bruce Campbell was in. I think it was in late 90s, I want to say. But it's on, I think they have all the episodes on Tubi. It was only like 2 seasons or so, but it was cool. Like they did, I can't remember whether they did time travel, but there was like sci-fi elements in it and like villains that would come in and they would mix like some kind of futuristic elements like Wild Wild West did, but good. So
yeah.
But Bruce Campbell is just super entertaining.
Oh man, I've yet to see anything that he's in that is just not enjoyable. I mean, even if the movie isn't considered all that great, like every scene he's in and the way he delivers his line is so entertaining. Like I think I mentioned that to you earlier today, where he has like a brief character in Spider-Man 2 where he's like a French waiter or a greeter, and like he only has like maybe like just a page full of lines, but like every line is just gold. Like and even his body movements and his body language, it adds to that. Like I dare you to find a scene or a movie where he's in that you don't like. I don't think it exists. I don't think it exists.
And see, that's a good point, because he's like, and all that stuff, like even in the scene in Doctor Strange where he's like the hot dog vendor, he has like short scene, but he's like tripping all over himself and spraying the mustard all over.
And that ending scene was a shout out to Evil Dead with his hand attacking him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the physical comedy, because I think Sam Raimi, well, he's mentioned this before, that he loves torturing Bruce Campbell. And Bruce Campbell is so good at physical comedy. Like when you watch those behind the scenes of, I have the Blu-ray of Evil Dead 2, and it's got some great behind the scenes shit on it of Bruce Campbell, like talking about how he's being tortured, and Sam Raimi's just laughing. And Bruce Campbell is just beating the crap out of himself, and he's doing like flips like on the floor when he's in the cabin. And he's just like, you're looking at that must hurt like something fierce. And Sam Raimi probably made him do it like 30 times or whatnot. But
man, I love that.
But so Bruce Campbell's just great at physical comedy.
That's so great.
Well, it's great. They have a great friendship, and Sam Raimi beats the crap out of him.
Yeah, and to this day, obviously, Doctor Strange. So
Well, and part of that too is because Evil Dead 2 was a total like. And speaking of like unusual movies, talk about an unusual movie. It's basically a Three Stooges horror movie.
I was getting a lot of those vibes when looking at Bubba Ho-Tep and John dies at the end. Like I was getting a lot of Evil Dead vibes.
Definitely.
Or I guess I would say tones, like the camera shots, and it's almost hard to, and you almost don't want to narrow down it as a genre. Like, oh, that's this, that, you know, it's almost like an ingredient of the filmmaking that you know, like it's not necessarily, oh, this is horror, this is comedy, this is like, it's more than that. Like it's a combination of how the acting is done, how the music is done, how the shots are shot, how the lighting and color, like all that together makes like one ingredient that you don't really see in Hollywood too much anymore. You know?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, I guess that's the best way I could put it is it's an ingredient. Like I don't want to narrow it down to a definitive word. You know, I think it's literally just an ingredient that a director uses in their movies that, yeah, you don't see too much anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that sticks out more for some weird reason.
It's hard to describe what it is, but you recognize
Yeah.
it when you see it, but you can't really like describe it that well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because it totally reminds me of like the difference between Hollywood and indie movies. Like you usually notice like a stamp, like when you watch an indie movie, you're like, okay, when Peter Jackson did his early stuff, well, Lord of the Rings as well too. It was one of the few that translated over when he did the Hollywood one. But
Yeah.
when he did like his old school movies like Dead Alive and Meet the Feebles and all that, like you totally know that's him that makes the movie. And same with Sam Raimi. And then, but like when some directors get one, when a lot of them get Hollywoodized, you can't tell it's them as much anymore. You can see traces of them in there, but their style doesn't stand out as much. Except for like Michael Bay, you can totally tell it's him when he's
done. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Some directors are like, yeah, that's that. Yeah.
But a lot of them are kind of like merge in, and it for some reason the Hollywood system sort of sucks them in and makes them become like one part of like a Borg, like one giant like Borg, and they're starting to lose their individuality.
Yeah, and I think that's also unfortunately kind of like how the movie is going to be marketed. Like, when you make a movie, when you're making a movie, you're bombarded with like, okay, so how are we going to market it? Are we marketing it to kids? Are we marketing to teens, adults? Okay, is this a comedy? Is it this? Is it like you need to have like this narrowed, or at least they want you to have this narrowed down path of what it is.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes it's very just open and like, well, I mean, yes, it is a horror, but yes, it is a comedy. Yes, it is musically awesome, has great music, so like it's like, so that's why I love subgenres, you know, like that, you know, and I think Hollywood, I don't want to just say Hollywood, but like, you know, film producers in general, like I've kind of relaxed a little bit more, where it's like it's not strictly this, it's not strictly that, it's a combination of this, and it makes a little soup, and this is what it is, kind of thing. And that's what I love about the Christmas genre. I don't want to get too off topic here, but you know, there's a whole big debate like, oh, what's a Christmas movie, what's not a Christmas movie, kind of thing. You've heard of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think the Christmas genre has spawned all these other genres. You know, so you can have a Christmas horror movie, you can have a Christmas action movie, you can have a Christmas comedy, you can have a Christmas kids movie, kind of thing. You know, I feel like that's a great example of something that's modern, that's become more broad. You know, like the Aliens movie. The first Alien movie is horror suspense. The second one is horror action.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, so anyway, so I personally love how it's becoming more broad, you know, and it's one of those things that happened and then was lost, and now it's coming back a bit more.
You know? Yeah, absolutely. I'm especially noticing that in indie stuff, they just keep experimenting and coming out. There's really cool when there's a cool, speaking of like Christmas horror movies, there's a cool one called Better Watch Out, and it's sort of like Home Alone, but as like a horror movie. And so it's like a home invasion, but it's a horror, because like if you think about like basically like the whole idea of it, they're like, you know, if that paint can flew through the air and smacked Joe Pesci in the head, it would probably kill him. So they do kind of
the paint can that would have killed this.
And I think that's kind of like
their faces.
Yeah, that's like the genesis of like the guys that were writing the movie, where they were thinking is like, you know, a lot of those stunts would be very dangerous and horrific. So that just turned into a horror movie. That's great.
In reality, you wouldn't have even gotten into the house after that. After burning your hand and falling down the stairs. You would have been like, I'm done.
Yeah, they lived through a ton of stuff. Well, they did kind of go cartoon with it, because like there's a part like where
it
they get lit on fire and then the hair is like all scorched up like a cartoon character when they
it does have, well, I mean, again, that's just an ingredient of the movie. Like it's Christmas, it's comedy, but then it has like slapstick kind of peppered in there, but it works, you know, like it's all, the art form is the way you put it in there. That's the art form.
That's true. Yeah.
Of mixing it and making it seamless, almost like you don't like it. it's almost like you don't realize it becomes slapstick because
Yeah.
you've been enjoying the movie so much.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it works because, and that's the art form of it, is how it's put together. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually love both. I love Home Alone, and I love that horror, that indie horror version of it. I love both those movies,
I should
and I
check
think
out
it's
that horror
cool that
version. I would love a good horror version.
and I think it's
Yeah,
cool that we
like
exist
Home
in
Alone,
in a world now where we have both of those. You can do like the crazy indie version, or you
no,
could do
exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're available streaming now too.
Yeah. Oh,
Awesome.
nice. Awesome.
So I think that one is on. Well, Better Watch Out is on a lot of formats. I think it's on Amazon and Tubi as well too. But yeah, it's available on like at least a couple different ones. But that's a great one though. That's a great
The title
one.
sounds familiar. Are there any actors in it that I would know, would you think?
There's
Like,
there's no names per se that I remember in it. One of the parents may have
the name
been,
sounds familiar.
but like all the
title
kid
of the movie.
actors, but all the kid actors, no.
Huh.
No.
So it's purposely a parody of Home Alone, but horror. Like
It's
the movie knows what it is, kind of thing.
it's basically like a dark comedy.
Yeah.
But the pranks kill people. And it's about a home, and it's about a home invasion, and there's a kid there when the parents aren't home, but they do a twist with it.
Okay.
On who the actual villain is. So yeah, so they do a couple, but other than that, it's very, but the basis of it is very home, and there's a lot of parallels to Home Alone.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I would love to watch.
And takes place on Christmas too. Yeah. So.
Oh, so then it's officially a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
I love that. Did you ever hear about the fan theory where Macaulay Culkin grew up to be Jigsaw from Saw? Ever heard of that?
It sounds familiar.
It's like it's just a funny fan theory where it's like he started out as making all these traps and they're kind of goofy, and then he grew up.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's like serious. He does serious like psychological traps. Like there's some sort of fan theory that kind of caught on. I don't want to trail off, but I just remember hearing that, and I thought,
it totally.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, I like that.
It totally makes sense.
He grew up to be Jigsaw.
Yeah. I mean, he's good at doing the pranks. He might.
Yeah.
If like something else went wrong in his life, like if his parents left him one more time, then he would turn to Jigsaw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, almost like one bad day, and he turns into Jigsaw.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so moving on to John Dies at the End. This is a very like bizarre psychedelic movie about a drug that's an alien. Well, the drug is sort of like a living kind of sentient drug, and it chooses the user. The basic premise of the movie is that a drug from outer space or an alternate dimension chooses these two slackers to save the world, to save Earth from an alien invasion.
Oh wow, I didn't catch that. Okay, so it's a drug from another place. I didn't. Okay.
Yeah, it's so there's.
I got here is it's a legal street drug in the universe of the movie.
Yeah, so they go to, so basically like these two slackers, they're already kind of open to the supernatural, so they do kind of like Ghostbusters sort of jobs like on the side, and they kind of, in one of the deleted scenes on the disc, they talk about how they can see, they can see dead people and things like that, and they're sort of tuned in to like their sixth sense is sort of tuned in, so they do this sort of supernatural like freelance work like the Ghostbusters do. And they go to this party.
I love that.
And they go to this party, and John in the movie, he ends up taking this drug from a Jamaican guy, who can read everybody's minds and interpret their dreams and tell them exactly what their dreams were. So, and this drug is what they refer to as soy sauce. So when he takes the drug and it comes out of the needle, you can see like these little spikes come out of it, like it's a living, almost like alien organism.
I saw a clip of that. Like it looks alive almost. Like it almost kind of looks like the Venom symbiote in a way.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it does. Yeah, totally. Like reminds me of the Venom symbiote. Yeah. Like the suit that could be growing into the suit to encompass you, but it basically gives people the ability to travel in and out of time. It gives them the ability to read minds. The main character, Chase Williamson, he's talking to John in a restaurant, and John calls him from the future and warns him and says, you may get other phone calls from like 8-9 years into the future from me, because I've done this several times. But the cool thing about this movie is that it doesn't show them traveling back and forth between time and slipping back and forth into dimensions, except for like towards the end of it. but like a lot of that like kind of time travel stuff is done over the phone or through voices on the phone. And like John is talking to Chase Williamson in the movie, and he's like, go over to that, like they're trying to find a way to talk. So when the main character's on the soy sauce, he's able to communicate with his dead friend. So his dead friend goes, go buy bratwurst from that street vendor over there. And then he buys it, and then he uses that as a phone, and his dead friends communicating to him on the phone.
Dude, that's so ahead of its time, if you ask me.
Yeah, there's just all.
Was that in the book?
I haven't read the book, but watching the movie totally makes me want to read the book.
Ahead of its time, if you ask me. Like that sounds like something like, I mean, wow, I love that. That's fantastic.
There's a lot of just like really cool ideas in this, but like the reason why the drug chooses him is because the drug takes other people over. So the other users that take over, like the Jamaican guy that can read people's minds, there's like basically like a bunch of creatures that fly into. Did you ever see Peacemaker, the John Cena show on HBO?
No, I haven't.
I
know the show, but I need to sit down and watch it.
It's cool. It's great. But there's these little there's these little flying alien insects, and they sort of fly in like this big swarm and go into somebody's body and take them over, and then they basically just kind of explode the body after they've used it as a vessel. So that's kind of what happens in this movie with the alien invasion segment of it. But the main character is Chase Williamson. He doesn't have that same effect. It won't kill him, but it allows him to talk to the dead and see into the future and like go back in time to stop people from. There's a part where he's going to get shot, where he goes back and he changes the munitions to put a fly in the reloading chamber of the gun, where it doesn't kill him, or it malfunctions, and he survives off of it. So it's able to do this kind of stuff, and also have these abilities that kind of reminded me of like the movie Limitless, where Bradley Cooper takes a drug and he's just all like sort of all knowing when you're on the drug.
That's a great one. Yeah.
And he has these abilities, but it doesn't kill him, which is awesome. So I mean, it's terrible for everybody else, but not for him. He's basically turns kind of like supernatural in it. And then the Paul Giamatti pops in, and you were talking about like interview that you saw with Giamatti, or
he loved the book, and the way they described it was non-linear.
Yeah.
It's meant to go from scene to scene to scene.
Yeah.
And you have all these loose ends from scene to scene to scene. Like things aren't explained, things aren't like, and it's done that way on purpose, you know. Like the movie, and that's how they said it was. It's not linear, which is because, you know, your average movie, you know, you have the introduction, the climax, the like, it's very structured like a play, you know, kind of thing, which is fine. It's beautiful, but this one is purposely the opposite of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They do have a Giamatti gets the story from him as sort of like a framing device at the beginning, towards the end of the movie, but when he goes in and tells his story, it uses that nonlinear fashion, probably that it adapted from the book. I don't know if the book starts out like completely nonlinear, but it reminded me of like a Tarantino thing, where it's like, but instead of the inner titles that Tarantino puts up, where he goes back to like, you know, he'll go to the different chapters or different locations or different parts in time. It's sort of in this movie, it kind of seamlessly and subtly works those into it. So it doesn't like blatantly say like what the character is going to do, but it's like, hey, I'm talking to you on the phone right now and I'm in the future, but doesn't show him going into the future, which is awesome.
And that's brilliant. Not only brilliant filmmaking, but that's brilliant writing.
Yeah.
Like I mean, we all know this, you know, it's better to show and not say what's going on, you know, like, exactly.
Great thing about this movie, the way I heard it described, I can't remember where I saw this, but it was on like the disc where I saw it described, but it was described as Naked Lunch meets Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And I think that's a perfect description for this movie. But like with like kind of like cosmic stuff to alternate, like in Naked Lunch, he's talking to bugs, and there's all these I guess there's weird things where he believes that he's like an assassin and all kinds of like on an interplanetary mission. So I guess that is very fitting to it. But that's a fantastic description for it.
You know, just also very fitting. Very fitting to that, the Bill and Ted. It's like how it starts out normal, and then it gets more and more bizarre and weird as the movie goes on. You know, like that's very in tune to Bill and Ted's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they do all kinds of time travel and that stuff as well too. Yeah. Cool, awesome. Okay, well, yeah. So check out these two movies for your Coscarelli combo. These are fantastic movies to watch if you're into something just bizarre, weird, and super entertaining, and has really like fun and bonkers dialogue in it. And check out Coscarelli's other movies too. Phantasm, especially if you haven't seen that before, and Beastmaster, which is an all-time favorite of mine. I know that you dig that as well too, Jefferson.
Yeah, we gotta discuss that one.
Yeah, actually, yeah, absolutely. So go ahead and promote your artwork on here.
You can find it under Apgar Arts, APGAR Arts, and you can find a lot of stuff under T Public, and I'm also with Ripped Apparel and T Fury. So
awesome.
And I do multiple mashed up artworks, all pop culture, Marvel, DC, Star Wars. It's all pop cultural related. So yeah, feel free to check it out. It'd be great. Yeah, there's plenty of great choices to choose from.
Yeah, Jefferson does all kinds of cool like character designs, artwork, and also got a lot of great like t-shirt mashups. Yeah, so check out those sites there. And that wraps it up for this episode. Thank you for listening to the Dead Harvey podcast. Thanks to our special guest host, Jefferson Apgar. We'll see you next time. And until then, stay on the road. Keep clear of the moors.